Hello, everybody, and welcome to our live stream for this week. Let's begin with a bow. And let's just sit for a couple minutes. So please bring your awareness into your body. Feel where your body is connected with the earth, your feet, your buttocks. If you're sitting cross-legged, your lower legs. And put your awareness strongly into the places that are touching the earth. And open your feet, your buttocks, your legs, and feel the energy of the earth, which is flowing into your body. It's a kind of tingly, alive feeling. It's very subtle, but very definite. And then coming to the back line, coming to your spine. And checking the alignment, moving a little too far forward, moving back and crossing the midpoint, a little too far back. Coming forward. And notice there's a moment when you're between too far back and too far forward. There's a little open line, and we're looking to hover right on that line. And then a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, and feeling your sits bones, noticing if one sits bone is more weighted than the other one. We're looking to equalize the weight, and as we go back and forth, feeling all the way up our back line to where we feel we're in that midpoint from right to left. Then the back of the head lifting on the in-breath, as if being pulled up by a sky cord, attached 2/3 of the way back at the suture junction. Then working more subtly with the spine by dropping the chin, which opens up the back line a little more. And then ears moving back as if they were trying to arrive over the shoulders. image keeps our head from dropping forward. And then beginning to breathe into the lower belly. Into the lower dantian or the hara, which is about 3 finger widths below the navel, in the mid to the back third of the body. Imagining a balloon there, and on the in-breath the balloon fills in the lower dantian. The back of the balloon touches the spine. The front of the balloon is about halfway forward, so it's in the back third, back half of the lower belly. In-breath, the balloon inflates. Out-breath, the balloon deflates. So let's work with that visualization just for a brief moment here. As you work with the visualization of the balloon, allow the body around the balloon and in the upper part of our body to relax. We're just relaxing into the process of the balloon opening and closing. And then see if you can feel the point right in the middle of the balloon where the breath is entering on the in-breath. You have to let go all around it in order to do that. It feels like a little point where there's definitely a visceral sensation. It could just feel like the breath is coming in. It could feel cool. It could feel fresh. It could feel quite empty and cool. We want to be with this point where the breath is coming in as fully as possible. And then have the feeling of opening that point up in like a ball of space that's expanding in all directions. So we're opening the point up, and in the center of that point is just empty space. So as we open the point up to make a kind of a round ball that is expanding slowly to fill our lower belly, we're touching the space that's in it. And then focusing on the space itself and letting ourselves breathe into that space and dissolve into it. So that even the visualization of the ball is becoming peripheral. There's mainly just a space that is appearing in the middle. And we're opening that space out. We want to open the space out over and over and over until we begin to feel lost in it. As if it's just space. There are no boundaries. There's no reference point. There's no orientation. There's just empty and open. And we're going to begin to open that space up the central channel. Inside the body, just this corridor of space, this tube of space, just in front of the spine, inside the body. So breath by breath, we're going to stay in the lower belly, stay in the space, but we're going to open that space up breath by breath, so that it rises from the lower belly, coming up behind the navel, staying rooted in the lower belly. We're not moving up, we're staying rooted, but we're opening up behind the solar plexus. Behind the heart center. Behind the throat center. And staying behind the experience of the lower belly, the experience of the solar plexus, the experience of the heart, experience of the throat. We're behind that in the empty, open corridor of the central channel. And then up to the back of the head to the occiput, the little bump in the back of our head. And we're breathing now, anchored in the lower belly, and feeling the updraft of the space of the lower belly up our central channel, gentle, subtle, and steady, arriving at the occiput, and lifting it ever so slightly on the in-breath. So now, resting all along this corridor of empty open awareness, from the lower belly where it's anchored up to the navel, solar plexus, heart, throat, and then to the occiput, just resting in that whole field of space. On the in-breath, being very there and feeling the slight updraft of that space awareness. And then beginning to feel the heart. Coming directly to the visualization of the 1,000-petal lotus. The central channel runs right through the middle of the 1,000-petal lotus. In the beginning, the lotus is closed, and we can't feel the space, this primordial, fathomless space at the very center of the heart, because the lotus is closed. But we begin to open the lotus petal by petal. Each of the petals represent armoring. So now breathing into the 1,000-petal lotus, breathing into the center, and the petals beginning to open. And each petal represents a fetter, a piece of armor, some pain, some pang, some achiness, some numbness. Breathing into the center and letting those obstacles, those barriers, those impediments, those coverings over our heart, letting them fall away one by one. And cultivating a visceral feeling of the heart. So we're actually contacting our armor, each little piece. And on the in-breath, breathing up into the heart, breathing into the fetter or the piece of armor, and letting it, as the petal opens, it falls away. And just as we did in the lower belly, moving now to open the space in the center of the heart. Opening, 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 and letting anything that is crowding that empty, open center of the heart fall away. Anything that's pressing in, anything that is getting away in the way of the empty, open heart space. On the in-breath, letting it open out and fall away. The heart is constricted, and so it takes some attention, some focus, and some effort to do this. We have to pay attention. We have to be willing to let go of our armoring, which can be a little bit scary. We're armored because we don't want to feel. We don't want to feel what we feel. We don't want to feel what the body feels, what the body knows. But there's no other way to connect with others. There's no other way to develop genuine loving kindness and sympathy and empathy and love. So breathing into the center, opening the space. And let the space become a little big, maybe the size of in diameter like a tennis ball. So you can really feel the space in the center of the heart. Or even the size of a grapefruit, if you like, in diameter. In size. Opening the space. And notice as you do so, notice as you do so, the space is alive. It's tingly. Like trillions of fireflies. It's almost vibrating. And notice what the feel is of that tingly space. It's slightly blissful. There's a strange kind of somatic passion, but very, very subtle. It's not passion about anything or toward anything. It's just a quality of the space. It's burning, it's smoldering with this indescribable, slightly blissful, slightly almost lustful feeling. Not anything to do with conditioned desire or conditioned passion or conditioned lust, but a quality of the space itself. Just feel it in the center of your heart. in this grapefruit size pool, really, of empty, open space, but space that's burning. See what it feels like, and see how you feel about it. This softly burning space is about something. And then you can open it out a little bit to discover what it's about. It's almost as if it needs to connect. And maybe it's about a world around us that needs our connection. But it's very strange because it's just the space itself that has these qualities, this temperature, this warm, almost in a very subtle way, blissful demeanor. And then very imperceptibly let this evolve just a little further into love. But love that is somatic, love that has a quality of wanting the other just for its own sake, for the sake of the other, not for the sake of the self. Almost wanting to connect. Love that wants to somatically feel the presence, the somatic being of the other. That kind of love. So we're extending out a little bit further now. We're opening the field of this blissful energy, this empty open space that has this burning quality, this quality of a very visceral kind of love. We're opening that space out now beyond our body. And we're feeling the presence of the world around us as we do this. Let your mind be empty and free. But whatever arises spontaneously in your field of awareness, let this slightly blissful, smoldering, somatic, loving space, let it meet whatever arises and suffuse it. Connect and suffuse. This visceral love of the heart and the other are not separate by any walls. This visceral, smoldering space can suffuse the other, meet the other, connect with the other in a way that is utterly intimate. And powerful. So we're just sitting, we're extending the heart space out, and whatever rises, we're meeting it, we're connecting, the space of our heart is meeting and connecting and suffusing. Always through this process, there's a continual opening and letting go in the heart space. The more we extend, the more we run into obstacles and impediments and hesitations. And as we're opening this space out, we are more and more letting those go and rendering ourselves naked, rendering our heart naked and open and unprotected. And then further extending out. And letting this tender, open, free, visceral love of the heart touch the whole universe. And be touched by it. Okay, very good. You must all be here in a very unique way tonight. And I thank you for it. So I'm going to check the time. I think we're doing okay. So I'm going to just say a little bit about what we're doing here is we are developing the practice of what's called the awakening heart, or bodhicitta. Chitta means heart in Sanskrit, and bodhi means awakening. And as I think I've mentioned, the reason we say awakening and not awakened is that the experience, and experience always trumps philosophy in the practicing lineage. The experience of the opening heart is that it's a process and a journey, and it goes on well beyond this lifetime. The heart is in the process of awakening, of connecting, and of loving. And the arenas and the spheres and the worlds that it touches are infinite. So it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And as Trungpa Rinpoche has said, it's a journey without goal. The journey is the goal. In the entire universe, as we've discussed, there are no goals. There are no endpoints ever to anything. There is only the unfolding out of empty space of being. All the myriad, infinite beings in all the worlds, seen and unseen, are making the very same journey we are, which is unfolding to become themselves, which is a profound mystery, an immeasurable mystery that has no boundaries. And it has no limits, it has no endpoint. So in the practice of awakening heart, or bodhicitta, which again is what we're focusing on in this, this part of the year, in the live streams, we have what's called ultimate bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta is the space in the lower belly, it's the space in the central channel, it's the space in the center of the heart. And the reason it's called ultimate is because that space, empty and utterly clear and infinite as it is, holds within it all of the possible experience, all of the possible love. When we connect very, very deeply with that space in this practicing lineage, in the Vajrayana, in the somatic meditation, when we connect with that space, deeper and deeper we go into it, more we discover there's something going on, as we did tonight. And what's going on is this fermenting, bubbling, scintillating, sometimes glittering, burning space. So there's the quality of the space itself. And that is the birth of relative bodhicitta, because that, as we saw tonight, that burning quality is about something, and it's about connecting. We saw last week that the space of the central channel can present in different ways in the sexual center, in the lower belly, in the navel, in the heart, in the throat, in the head. In the heart, which is the center of the connectivity of our being, which is so fundamental, it presents itself as love. And coming out of the absolute bodhicitta, there is the feeling and the imperative to follow the love of the heart as it wants to connect in a very visceral, tangible way with the world. So ultimate bodhicitta is always where we begin, and it leads us into not only connecting with the world around us in a very somatic and visceral way, but it leads us to love, to appreciate, to fully receive the beings around us, and to act on their behalf. That's relative bodhicitta. So, one final comment, and then maybe we can discuss some questions. What we are doing all together in the somatic lineage is we are trying to connect with an experience of being human that is more fundamental than the version of the left brain. The left brain version is a facsimile, always. The small self, the conceptualized self. And most of us live within an identity that is defined by our thinking mind. And what we are doing here is developing a different experience of being human in all different kinds of ways, as we have seen, throughout the teachings of this lineage. It's a way of being human that is rooted in the eternal and the infinite, that is rooted in the fundamental freedom of our basic soma, that is filled with the experience of well-being and power and joy and confidence. And what happens when we connect with that depth of our own person is, to use the words of psychology or trauma therapy, that experience disconfirms the version of ego. That experience of ourselves, we could say it's the experience of the true self, it disconfirms the version of the false self. And that begins to invite us to shift our allegiance from the version of the false self to this much deeper, actually true self that we are, which is so profound and so loving and so vast. In trauma therapy, this is actually how trauma is healed by those of us when we're in traumatic states, which includes all of us, that we begin to cultivate an experience of the soma. And when we cultivate that experience of the soma, we come upon, again, an experience of being me that is empty and open and endless and free. And that in itself heals trauma. It heals our dysfunction, it heals our pain, it heals our ego problem. These are all different ways of saying the same thing. So at this point, I'd like to invite Elizabeth to come join me. And let's see what you guys have come up with for tonight. Hi, Elizabeth.
Good to see you.
How are things going?
They're good.
Yeah?
Yeah. I wanted to tell you, over the past couple weeks, I've had the chance to meet with some of my Dharma Ocean MI students.
Oh, yeah?
A handful of them, and they all went to Datun.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
How
and
are
it
they
was
doing?
really beautiful to see. I love the MI relationship because I feel like when you get to meet people, it's been a while since I've seen them, a couple months, and then you meet, and it's this really deep dropping in, and it's really intentional.
Yeah.
It's just this really beautiful mirror
Yeah.
to see the growth and the change and the opening,
Yeah.
always, but especially after them attending Datun. In all of them, I see this simple confidence. They trust themselves more and more and more, and they're more embodied than I've ever seen.
That's beautiful.
And each in their own unique way, but there's this theme. So I just saw another one last night, and it really struck me like, I'm seeing, in all these people, this is what's happening. So
It is amazing. It's very, very moving. And you've said to me, Caroline says to me, after one of those meetings, you work on yourself, and of course you notice a lot of changes. You feel, things opening up in a lot of ways. But somehow when you see it in somebody you're working with, it kind of shocks you.
Yeah.
And Caroline, so often comes home and said, wow, these teachings really work.
Yeah.
I go, yeah, they do work.
Yeah.
But I feel that way too. I mean, I would say the most inspiring thing, absolutely the most inspiring thing about the work that we do is seeing what happens to people. And I could give you as an example over the years. I mean, it's unbelievable, the journey, that you've made.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I could
amazing.
cry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You talk about the Vajra body.
Yes.
And I remember VTI last year.
Yeah.
I work as a medical intuitive and acupuncturist, and I was looking at one of our Sangha members after VTI, and I had not attended that year. And it was like the Vajra body. It was all hooked up, and everything was flowing, and it was so easy to treat them. But I don't know. It was just like, oh, that's what Reggie's talking about. It's
that's
like
beautiful.
Everything's connected and moving, and
Yeah.
it's so deep and open, and it was neat to see.
No, it's great. The empirical evidence is really, really helpful because, that kind of feedback, it gives you a little bit more to go on, than just your intuitive sense of what's happening.
Yeah.
That you really, as a healer, you go in and you see things happening.
I also hear a lot of people praise Neil and his teaching. They all just fell in love with Neil. So he did a great job, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're talking about Neil McKinley, who led the first 2 weeks of the Daten. I was in Hawaii on retreat, and it's the first time we've really done that, where somebody else led the first 2 weeks, and then I came in for the second 2 weeks. And I heard the same thing. And, I will say one thing for you and Neil and Jonathan and Corey, who's here, that, and I'll use Neil as an example, there is a very high price to pay.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of a couple of years ago. Neil's been a student, I don't know, for 12, 15 years. And going along, a great guy, practicing very deeply, very devoted, to his journey and to the lineage. And about 3 years ago, he started doing these bodhicitta practices, and a lot of things came up that he had never really faced before. And, he was leveled, and, unbelievable courage came up from the depths, and he's a different person now. I mean, it's very kind of ambivalent for me I feel very ambivalent working with you guys because I know what happens. And, I know, it's not like, the fact that I'm around doesn't really help. I mean, it helps in one way, in the same way that Trungpa Rinpoche helped me, but in a way it doesn't help because you kind of have to do the work yourself. And I will say, I didn't hear from Neil for 9 months, which is very unusual. And I'll say I held my breath. I was holding my breath for 9 months, and I was really hoping that he was going to come through, because you never really know. You don't even know about yourself. So I have a tremendous amount of awe and respect for those of you who are really taking this on and really making the journey over many, many years. I have so much awe for you.
I'm so grateful. So grateful.
So what's cooking tonight?
I thought I'd first read a question about trauma, since you brought that up.
Sure, yeah.
Satnam in Germany. I am working as a therapist in Germany. Often I experience how the last and deepest release of trauma doesn't come out of therapy, it comes out of embodied spirituality with meditation. What kind of practices would you recommend to work with for my own journey and also for working with others when I encounter the issue of trauma, which seems to me to be very close to what is called in my tradition the second veil, which you've talked about?
I would like to, I'm going to, say something, but I gave a talk at the Daten. Jonathan, is this talk, on the freeing the prisoners?
Yes.
Do you think it'd be possible to put that up on the website for people?
Yes.
What do you think?
I think we can do that.
I mean,
still
is
have to put up the outline from 2 sessions ago. We'll do that as well.
yeah. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of work to do, and the staff is tremendously overworked. But I think when you can get to it, it would be very useful for people, because that really answers the question quite fully of what we're doing and how it relates to trauma. But I'll say a couple of things. Let me say a couple of things now. And who is it? What's his name?
Satnam.
Satnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's put it this way. If we follow a style of meditation that does not particularly connect with the body, I mean, fine, you can use the breath, you can do a body scan, but basically the meditation is about using the body as a stepping stone to feeling more peaceful, feeling more relaxed, feeling more open. You have that as your agenda. That's what you're looking for. That's wonderful. It's a very, very, very good resource, and it's very helpful. But if you have something such as, feeling more peaceful, feeling more relaxed, feeling more open, getting along with people better, if you have a conscious agenda, you're going to keep at bay a lot of things that are inconsistent with those ideals, that actually they're down there, and you're keeping them at bay because of what you're looking for. I'm not saying there's a problem, but if that's your approach, and obviously Satnam is not his approach, but I'm just contrasting. If that's your approach, then trauma is not going to be accessible to you in the way that we need it to be in the Vajrayana. A lot of trauma work tends to be, it's reactive and it's defensive. In other words, we want to put out the fires of ourselves or our patients. We want to stabilize people, and we want people to be able to get back to the project of living their life. But in the Vajrayana, we actually seek out trauma. We seek it out because it holds pieces of ourselves that are critical to our own development and our ability to love others. So the Vajrayana is a much more proactive attitude toward trauma altogether. So within that, what happens is, when we come into the body, and we learn how to temporarily set aside our thinking mind, and we connect with our viscera, we connect with our corporeal existence, our visceral sensations of being alive, of being here. What that does is, it opens up, strangely enough, it opens up, and sorry to be a little bit technical, what's called the medial prefrontal cortex, which is an area of the brain here that is connected with the natural state. So this is very interesting. People have figured out that the empty open space of just feeling our being, and they've done it through people who've had severe trauma and accidents, it's connected with this part of our brain, the medial prefrontal cortex. So we come into the body, that space opens up, and that space is not directly accessible except through the body. That's the interesting point. When that opens up, then we have access to the emotional brain. The emotional brain is directly available through this corporeal, visceral life of the sensate body. That's how we get access to the emotional brain. So we're opening up a channel. And the emotional brain is what we need to work with, the amygdala. We have to work with that in order to allow trauma to arise, in order to be grounded enough in our body to be able to receive the experiences of trauma, and to be able to not depart from our basic nature, from the empty open space of our awareness, and in that way to allow the trauma to complete itself, because all trauma wants to complete itself. It wants to fulfill its journey, and the journey is to be experienced by our conscious mind fully, because that's what didn't happen in the beginning. Any traumatized experience, we have lost. We set aside or rejected the ability to experience the extraordinarily unbearable, painful feelings of that particular situation. We set it aside, and that's what trauma is. It's, that the experience never really was received. And so now here we are as adults, connect with the body, and then trauma becomes available. It arises within the space of our somatic being, within the space of our basic nature, and we can be with it, and we can track it, and we can allow it to teach us and touch us. So you could say, I don't want to be too long-winded here, but you could say, why bother? And I think we've discussed this. The reason why, from the Vajrayana point of view, we have to resolve trauma, and that has to be at the center of our journey, is that any unfinished or incomplete or trapped feeling that we have been repressing our whole life, and there are probably thousands and thousands of such trapped feelings. Any of those that are not allowed into consciousness, we have to use a huge part of our awareness to keep them in the unconscious. That's what repression is. It's tying up our awareness in the process of keeping those feelings under cover. So if you're doing just to basically, following the breath and then just trying to be peaceful, most of your awareness is actually tied up keeping the feelings that are in contradiction to that out of your consciousness. And your awareness it may be peaceful, but it's not going to be big. It's not going to be vast, and it's definitely not going to be infinite. So one reason we need to resolve trauma is that it's the only way to experience the vastness and the immeasurable beauty and freedom and joy of our awareness, the full extent of it. And the second thing is, trauma limits our human experience, because, as we know, trauma is, through all the traumas we've had, we've created a lot of habitual patterns, unconscious emotional assumptions, unconscious beliefs about how things are, and they really prevent us from experiencing our life openly. And in the Vajrayana, we are deeply moved and inspired and longing to experience the totality of our human life. And as long as we are pushing against trauma and not resolving it, that's not going to be possible for us. That vastness and the sacredness and the spontaneous beauty of our life is going to be hidden from us. Mm-hmm. So in the Vajrayana, the whole process is working with trauma, and the only way to do it is through the body. You have to go through the gate of the body. There is no other way to do it. And we know this in Vajrayana, but it's interesting. So many therapies now, somatic therapies, are saying the same thing, whether we're talking about Hakomi therapy, whether we're talking about EMDR, whether we're talking about biofeedback, whether we're talking about internal family systems, whether we're talking about memory reconsolidation, whether we're talking about Van der Kolk's, work at his trauma center in Boston. All of these therapies are basically saying that the only way to access trauma is through the body. You have to go through the body. You can't bypass it. And going through the body means working at a tremendous depth with the body, and then having the stability to experience what the trauma needs from us. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's kind of the short version.
Do you have any practices that you particularly suggest that he could work with the patients?
All of the body work accomplishes this. Mm-hmm. And I would suggest using 10 points practice, which is very safe. Mm-hmm. I would suggest using the earth, but also do it in a very mild way. Those would be the two main ones. Mm-hmm. But the main thing, if we're therapists and working with patients, Peter Levine, and I forgot to mention Peter Levine with somatic experiencing, same exact approach. He has this term called pendulation, and what that means is that we, particularly working with patients, Or like sometimes we have people come to programs who are actually really very traumatized and very afraid of their bodies. Pendulation means that you work like 10 points practice, you might only work with their feet, and you might have them only just try to feel their feet, in the beginning, or even just feel their toes. And maybe that's as far as you go. In other words, you go forward, and then you come back, and they work on that for a week, and then the next week you could have them try to feel the soles of their feet. And then you draw back when they become afraid. Because in the beginning, particularly if we're very traumatized, the body's a threatening place because the body is the gate to traumatic, to contacting our traumatic feelings. So I would say, use 10 points practice, use going into the earth practice. You can use whole body breathing is very good. But again, with patience, pendulating, only going as far as that particular person feels comfortable and then pulling back. But in the long term, it's unbelievable what can be developed and the changes that actually happen. If he's willing to be, if we, when we're in a therapeutic situation, are willing to be patient, over the course of a year, there'll be unbelievable changes. But the whole thing is having as we have to do as MIs, is having the intuitive intelligence to know how much is enough and how much is too much, and not going there, with folks. And really, because what we're trying to do is develop a feeling in them, I'm talking about patients now who are traumatized, a feeling of safety, a feeling of being grounded, and developing a connectedness with their somatic being, because that's where the confidence comes from, to be able to experience trauma. Van der Kolk basically says, without the body, people simply do not have the somatic wherewithal, the visceral confidence to be able to be, with traumatic feelings. Jung said exactly the same thing. Yeah. The body is really the answer. So I think that's why, in the Vajrayana so much is made of the body, because the Vajrayana is interested in resolving trauma, and that's the key piece, is the soma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kirsty in the UK, please could you say something about compassion and empathy, what they are and are not? My doctor has given me time off from work for exhaustion and burnout, and has used the term compassion fatigue, which is new to me. As a school teacher, I have previously been responsible for helping to look after some very traumatized children. I have to just let go of that role and have gone back to classroom teaching as it was. Oh, I guess the teaching was overwhelming. It seems that it left me empty and drained. The way I have helped to look after these children feels toxic. It feels like a prisoner who has been too kind, too caring, and now no longer cares about anyone or their needs.
Very, obviously, as you know yourself, a very prevalent story among people who care for other people. We've been talking about this a lot lately, and you have been part of this conversation also, that the only way to work with other people is from a place of being able to stay home. And so many healthcare workers feel that they need to leave their basic being and extend their energy out and try to help people feel better. When you do that, that's actually not compassion. That is, it's a kind of, with all due respect, it's a kind of a codependency where you are invested in being the savior. You're invested in helping this other person. And at that point, you've lost your ground and you've lost your connection with the source in yourself. And you're going to go down sooner or later. So I think, so many of you are healers and therapists, in our Sangha, body workers, teachers of all kinds. And I think what we are developing in our work is exactly what we're doing here. When you sit and you leave yourself behind, you leave home, and you go out and you try to help somebody, that's the bad approach. That's the approach that's going to lead you into very quickly into burnout. But if you are home in your heart and you open the space of your heart to include the other, and you allow the intelligence of your heart to show you how to be with that other person, then, as Trungpa Rinpoche often said, it's actually very energizing for you. It nourishes you to open your heart, because you're not leaving yourself behind, and you're not engaging in a lot of strategies, but you're opening and you're allowing the other person to be held in this greatly expanded heart of yours. And out of that, healing comes. And there is no burnout. So it's actually very, very simple. But I think, I'll speak for myself. I spent much of my life basically trying to help everybody else, starting with my own family. I mean, this is not an unusual story. Trying to help everybody else be okay. And that pattern, turned me, and it turns many of us, into these sort of quasi-savior figures.
Mm-hmm.
So our identity is bound up with actually making other people feel better. And the bad news is we have to actually let that identity go. We really have to let it go. And we have to get out of the business of saving people. We just need to receive them within our heart space and then be with them, which is actually the deepest compassion and the deepest gift you can ever offer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so many of us in the spiritual field, have that. I'm sure you have it. I think Jonathan has it. Probably Corey has it. And, we all have to work on that.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said. I wonder what you think about this. I noticed for me that when I would get the most exhausted by a patient, it was because I didn't think their suffering was okay.
Yeah.
In the sense that I recognized there was a basic distrust of reality, that I was rejecting their experience because it was so painful.
Yeah.
And that's when I would get sick or feel overwhelmed by them.
Yeah.
And I recognized in a way it was like aggression towards reality.
Yeah.
And in a way I was solidifying their reality because I was making it not okay.
Yeah, interesting.
So that sense of, you teach us this within my students, that we have to trust their life and trust what's happening.
Yeah.
And then you can actually work with someone.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's very well put.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I will say one thing for me. If somebody comes to me and says, oh, you've got to help me. I know you can help me. And there's this underlying thing is, if you don't help me, I'm really going to be pissed off. I don't get hooked so much anymore, but I used to really get hooked by that. The people come in demanding that I help them. And I would just cave. And then, let me see what I can do, and you could do this, and you could do that, and all of a sudden I'm gone. And I would, all I need is one interview like that, and I'm shot. I would come home, and Caroline would say, go take a walk. I don't want you around here. What did you do? Have a bad interview? Yeah. But it's just losing it. It's being sucked in by my own, being triggered by my savior complex. But I love what you said. I think that's... that's pretty much it. It's really a lack of trust in the other person, isn't it? Fundamentally. Yeah.
And in life, it's showing an imbalance, and it's, can you trust that it's trying to express itself through the pain, through the suffering?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing I've noticed, if I have the wherewithal to kind of receive them and open to them but not react, they kind of figure it out most of the time.
Yeah, totally. They already
that's
know.
Interesting.
Yeah. Sharon in California. For years, my resistance has been a very big obstacle to spiritual practice. Now I find myself drawn to spiritual practice, and I have a troubling feeling that this is just another way to support my passivity, a spiritual deferment, as it were, from engaging in the action that my life or my heart might be demanding. How to stand between the pull to practice and the pull to mend my life? Why does it appear to me that these are in conflict, and why do I find it so hard to trust?
Truthfully, I think she's thinking about it too much. I mean, obviously she has a call to spirituality, to spiritual work. I would trust it. And, I think, again, the spiritual work needs to be connecting with her deeper being, not having any kind of strategy about what it's supposed to look like. And, any particular format, like, I need to, spirituality means meditating like 2 hours a day, or spirituality means this or it means that. The basic thing in the spiritual journey, the ground, the foundation out of which everything comes, is connecting with the body. And again, we're not talking here about the conceptual body, we're talking about the body, the real body that we come across in the somatic work. So my suggestion would be, she's overthinking it, and I would just set aside a little bit of time every day and work on the body, work with developing a sense of what's going on in the body, what are the sensations, what's the visceral feel, what are the spaces in the body like, and then paying attention to how the body feels about things, and allowing the body to be in control, because right now it feels like her ego mind is in control and is trying to sort it out and manage it. It's not going to work. You can't do it. The ego cannot solve its own problem. The only one that can solve the problem of the ego is the body. So that would be my suggestion. Put in some serious hours, lying down and doing body work.
This is a follow-up question from last week. Doris asked about, she has this spontaneous process that happens when she's in a group situation, and she'll make noise or shudder, and then she doesn't feel supported in the group. You suggested that I work one-on-one if I don't feel supported and safe with this happening in a group. The problem is that the group situation is what provides the necessary fire or combustion for that sort of process to take place. When I work one-on-one, there's not necessarily anything that happens. This is a catch-22 for me, as I value these experiences, and they feel so much deeper than my regular superficial life, and yet I don't feel understood or held when I'm going through them.
Yeah, but the thing is, nobody feels understood in a group. I mean, what's the problem? That's why we're in the group. To discover that fundamentally nobody likes anybody else, nobody gives a shit, and nobody understands us. That's why we're in the group. So if you go in with a group and you come in with all these preconceptions about what's supposed to be happening in the group and how you're supposed to feel, you're going to be screwed. It's not going to work. So, I would take the attitude that the purpose of the group is to be the group. And even if it's painful, that's part of the deal. What's the problem? I don't see the problem. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I don't like groups.
Me either.
Yeah, I can't stand groups.
Yeah.
I go into a group of the staff and it's painful. Then I'll get some nasty feedback, I don't like it. But so what? What's the problem? So maybe she could tell us what the problem is.
Okay.
Is it that she feels it shouldn't be painful, or she shouldn't feel uncomfortable or unseen, or what? That'd be my question.
Yeah. She doesn't feel understood or held. She values the process that she goes through, but she doesn't feel held while she's going through the process.
What's the problem? Of course she's not held. I mean, going in and saying, I'm in the group here now, everybody's going to have to hold me, you're in control. And that's not what groups are about, right? Groups are about that you're not in control. There are going to be times when you do feel held, but if you go in with the assumption that the group is supposed to hold you, you're never going to feel held. So I would give it up, and I would just, jump into the group and just be there. Give it up. Let the group be whatever it wants to be, and be in it. And, if the pain gets to be too much, breathe into your lower belly and tune them all out. That's what I do.
Jack in Yorkshire. Whilst practicing breathing into the heart, the sensation of the heart spreads through the space of the body, which flows from discomfort to light and joy. It's like a temporary effect of extending somatic shamatha practice. While practicing heart breathing, should I avoid becoming over-concentrated and instead bring more vipassana awareness into the practice to look into the underlying changes within the space of the body?
Yeah, you see the term there that makes me uncomfortable is should. He said, should I? And again, I think it's overthinking. It's trying to come up with a strategy for working with the heart. And what I would suggest is breathe into the heart and just follow the instructions of the practice like we did tonight. Just do the practice And don't be trying to figure out what else you could do or what else you might do. I think, with the somatic protocols, the first thing is to learn and explore the practice thoroughly, and then you can be more freeform. But if you don't start sort of just following, the container of the practice itself, then you can't tell if the freeform is your ego doing something, or you're trying to avoid something. You see what I mean? So that'd be my suggestion. Just, don't overthink it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Shall we do one more?
Sure, yeah.
This is Lorna in London.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that my body is really calling for this work, so I have been engaging in the breathing body work. Although I feel that my body really wants to engage, sometimes when I practice I realize how fatigued I am, and a part of me wants to sink in further, and another part is resisting as though in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
After the practice I can feel like I'm about to come down with the flu.
Mm-hmm.
A part of me is scared that if I give in, I won't get up again, and I have to go to work and earn money, etc. Is it common to feel so fatigued? Should I give in? How do I work gently with the conflict that I feel?
Yeah, I always give in to the body. If she has to go to work, I'd set the alarm. If you know that there's a chance you're going to go to sleep, I would set the alarm and then do the body work. And if I've been through this, many times in my life where I go on retreat and all of a sudden it's, wow, I'm going on retreat and I'm going to practice 10 hours a day. And I spend the first week sleeping all the time.
I do the same thing.
Yeah. You got to trust the body. And then at the end of the week, you get up and you practice and you're there and it's great, and then maybe 2 days later you go back to sleep again. We have to learn, when we say trust the body, this is serious. We're talking about trusting the body. You got to trust the body. You can't say, well, I'm going to trust the body if it does this, but if it tells me I'm tired, I'm not going to trust it. We're talking about unconditional trust of the body. And then just set the alarm, so you don't miss work. That'd be my suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
There are no rules here, except what the body, as you know, there are no rules. It's just what the body notifies us is needed. It's that simple. We have to turn. This is a common theme through all these questions tonight. Could we turn the agency over to the body? Mm-hmm. Rather than trying to think it through and figure out what we should do and how we could do it and what we should do and how we can not do it, rather than trying to figure it all out, could we really put our energy into developing a sense of what the body wants? And the body, believe me, the body wants something from each one of us. It definitely wants something, and it is, as you know, it's an incomparable guide. So our problem is not what should I do, it's that we won't listen. We're not listening, and we're not developing the tools to be able to hear the guidance that the body is giving us about our life and about our journey. Mm-hmm. So practice, 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 practice. Yeah, you don't have to practice endless hours, but it needs to be steady, whatever it is.
Yeah. Would you like me to announce about your coming week?
Yes, that's a good idea. Let's do that. Yeah.
So we won't be together next week because Reggie will be in the Bay Area from March 3rd to the 5th.
But we're having an event, aren't we, Jonathan? We're going to play something?
We're either going to play something, or we had talked about maybe doing a Google on air, so we could talk about that afterwards.
Oh,
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll let you know with email what we decide
We're
to
going
do.
to do something, though, during this time slot.
We'll do something.
Yeah.
March 3rd through the 5th, Reggie will be in the Bay Area presenting at CIIS and at the Non-Dual Conference. And you'll be at the East Bay Meditation Center on Monday, March 7th from 7 to 9 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the Sangha gathering? Yeah. Nice.
And what about Anam's place? Should we talk about that?
Sure. I don't have that in my list. Do you know the details?
No.
No.
I'm teaching at Anam Tubden's place, and I think people are invited if they want to come over on Tuesday night. Isn't that right,
Great.
Jonathan? Somebody?
I believe so.
I think so, Tuesday night, yeah. Yeah, this is the California Institute of Integral Studies, and a week from today I'm doing an all-day workshop and talking about trauma as a spiritual opportunity, and we've talked about that a little bit tonight. And then on Friday night, I'm I'm doing a keynote talking about the unique Vajrayana approach to trauma. And then on Sunday morning, I believe, I'm doing a workshop where we're going to be looking at some techniques for working with, I think it's for therapists, psychiatrists and psychologists and who work with trauma. We're going to be looking at some specific techniques we can use with our patients. So it's going to be, there are a lot of other interesting things happening and interesting people at this conference who are working with trauma. So I'm looking forward to it, and I think I'm really going to learn a lot.
Yeah, it sounds really great.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation and the questions and everything, it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One last piece is David Iozi here in Boulder is going to be teaching a program to the Tantrikas in Dharma Ocean called Invoking the Protectors, and that starts 1 week from today.
Oh, great. Great. Is that a weekend program?
It is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, folks. Well, it's always wonderful to be with you. And actually, we need to think this through because the following week I'm still going to be in the Bay Area. Maybe we could do a live stream on Thursday night, from the Bay Area.
Shannon's service is going to help us make those possible.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I could report on the conference and just show you some of the things that came up. Yeah. Okay. So thanks again, and let's close with a bow.